3D Evil Clown Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish. Hi guys, in today's video I'm doing a super creepy, at least to me, very evil looking clown face. So it's just basically black background, really big clown face, and it's so big that actually it doesn't entirely fit on the nail. So it's kind of off center, and you can see like the face, and then there's some hair that comes out to the other side. So it's really, I don't know, it's one of those things you just look at and kind of go, ooh. I don't know, at least I do. I kind of go, it's not so good. And it's very similar to a way that I painted my face 2 years ago, just about exactly 2 years ago, and I'll put a link to that face painting tutorial in the description box below because it kind of has the same effect. When I was wearing that face paint, my dad came up the steps and he goes, oh, when he looked at me, because it was just a little shocking. He got used to it, it was all good, but it was just funny because it's so shocking. So check that video out as well, so if you're interested in all these evil clowns. I hope you like this design, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future Halloween designs as well. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with an overlay of black acrylic over the entire nail just to create a really nice background. If you don't want to use black acrylic, I know that I personally kind of, I don't like using black acrylic to create an overlay like this all that often. I find that it makes my monomer really kind of yucky, but you can always take and just do an overlay with clear acrylic and then paint it with black gel polish. You lose a little bit of that depth that using the black acrylic with the clear gives you, but it's definitely an alternative if you, like me, are kind of like, ew, I don't want to use black acrylic. But then if you do it this way, go ahead and encase it with clear acrylic, and then I'm going to be filing the nail into shape. So I'm first using a barrel or a football shaped bit that's a little bit coarser and just going to go over the entire thing, and then I'm going to refine just the surface smoothness with a much finer bit just to make sure that it's a little bit easier to sculpt on, not as many little cracks and crevices for the acrylic to sink into. So now with white acrylic I'm going to start and just do the very base shape of his face. So I'm just going to kind of outline it basically and add a layer of acrylic over the top of the entire thing, just so that I have, like I said, that base down so that I can then build up from there. So I'm just going to kind of work on it. As you can see, I sort of bumped out his cheekbone, and then I also added a nice little cleft chin for him. And as you can tell, I sculpted his face to the side of the nail, so it's not right in the center. I wanted it, like I said in the intro, to be really, really big on the nail, really kind of in your face. So I didn't want to have it so that it was right in the center because I definitely needed hair as well. So I figured if I did it slightly off center, then I would definitely be able to get face and hair and have it be just slightly bigger. So now after I have that done, I'm just going to kind of start carving in his brow bone. So I put down that bead of acrylic and then formed it into sort of a wide V, and then carve that out to have the eye sockets, and then add more acrylic over the forehead, and then carve in more of those V's for the wrinkles on his forehead. Now he's got this really wrinkly kind of gross exaggerated forehead, so just keep adding those wrinkles in all the way up to the top of his head. And then I'm going to be adding some more acrylic to his cheekbones. So basically I'm adding acrylic everywhere but his eye sockets. So I'm leaving those eye sockets plain, really sunken in, and since my white acrylic isn't super opaque, it does show some of that black through it, so it looks a little darker in there just from the beginning, and I'll add a lot of paint to it later, so that's not super important, but just a little detail. And then I'm going to be sculpting out his lips with white acrylic. Now the reason I'm using white instead of a red acrylic is because red acrylic tends to bleed onto other colors, and it tends to leave kind of a mess, and I want to keep everything really clean looking at this particular point and add all the colors later. So I wanted to just use white, and then I'll paint them with red later on. So just add that white acrylic, and then since his lips took a little bit more space than I thought they were going to, I'm going to be adding more acrylic to his chin and bring that down just a little bit farther. Just like that. Yeah, his mouth ended up being slightly bigger, but I wanted to make sure I had room inside his mouth for all of his teeth. So then I'm switching to a smaller brush, and I'm going to be adding his ear. So his ear is right to the side of his cheekbone. Very simple. You don't have to add too many details here since a lot of it's going to be covered up with hair. So then add his nose, and this I am using red acrylic, so I'm just going to be setting that down. Since there's not too many manipulations that have to be done with his nose, it can just be set down and it's fine. And then I'm going to be doing really thin red acrylic to the side of his head for his hair, and then using a pointy silicone tool, I'm just going to carve all kinds of squiggles into that wet acrylic, which is going to give it a really nice frizzy hair sort of texture. So I'm going to be adding a little bit below his ear as well. So I did it above his ear to the side of his head and then below his ear. And I'm not going to be adding too much hair. I mean, I want this to look kind of stringy, and you know, he's a clown that's It's been to a few too many carnivals. And then I'm going to be adding a little bit of that hair over his ear. So I add some of that acrylic and then just pulling that out with my pointy silicone tool. And if you need to, you can periodically kind of wipe off the extra acrylic that is building up on that silicone tool just on your paper towel. So now with red paint, I'm just going to kind of be running my brush over the top of his hair to be adding all of the little highlights. Now red paint is going to be a little bit brighter than my red acrylic. My red acrylic is more of like a cranberry color. So that's going to really brighten up those areas. So I'm also doing that over his nose, and that's the same color that I'm going to be using to paint his lips. So like I said, his lips are going to be really, really bright red. That is going to definitely be, you know, I mean, especially painting it over the white, it's going to be a very vivid color. Everything is going to show up really well. When you're painting his lips, you can continue the color into his mouth some because he has gums that are showing because he's got this really big grin. So he's grinning past his teeth onto his gums. So you can continue that into his mouth. And then with some bright green paint, I'm going to be adding the little kind of kite shapes that are over his eyes. So the bigger part of the triangle or trapezoid or diamond shape is above onto his forehead, and then it comes down onto his cheek just a little bit over his eyes. And then fill in the center of his mouth with black and kind of blend the red into it so that it fades to black in the center. So since you're going to be adding his teeth over the top of this, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm also going to be adding a little bit of black shadowing on the bottom of his nose. And then also taking some black, I'm going to start adding the details to his eyes. So I'm just going to start with an outline, just kind of sketch those in. Now his one eye is really close to the edge of the nail. If you don't have the space to fit in the entire eye, you can, you know, just fit in whatever works. This is a thumbnail, so it's a little bit on the wider side. I believe it's a size 3 nail tip. So I have, you know, a lot of space to work on here. So then I'm going to be diluting some black, and I'm going to be just sort of carving in his wrinkles a little bit more, making sure that they're really easy to see and that they're nice and vivid and that they're there. And then adding a couple details in his ear, making sure his ear is a little easier to see, and then shading around his eyes, almost giving him an eyeshadow type appearance. I really wanted his eyes to look sunken in and like they're just these beady little eyeballs poking out. And adding a little bit of shadows around his mouth, on his lips, on his chin, on his forehead. You know, just keep adding diluted black. You don't want it to be so pristine and white. And then with white, I'm going to be adding some highlights. Highlights are going to make everything look so much more 3D and so much more vivid. And then adding some highlights on his nose and some highlights on his lips like they're really shiny. And then I'm going to be adding his teeth. And his teeth I added with kind of a light mustardy style yellow. So I'm going to just kind of add those in, very basic teeth shapes, just kind of ovals basically, and then adding just a touch of white on each tooth just to add just a tiny bit of shape to them, not so that they look like they're white, just a little bit. Then using that same yellow and white combination, fill in his eyes. Eyes a little bit whiter than his teeth are. Make those a little, just a touch whiter. And then I'm going to be using some red, just like I used red on his lips. So I'm going to be doing a little red outlining on his eyes, orange for the irises, and then black for the pupils. So he's got these really kind of crazy eyes, and that orange iris color is really going to contrast well with the green that's going around his eyes and make them look just kind of haunted, and I don't know, you'll see them really well. Then going back to black paint, I'm going to take and I'm just going to add a little bit more to that wrinkle that's right on his brow bone, and just add a little bit more around his eyes and just a little more definition in his wrinkles on his forehead. Then I'm going to be applying a layer of gel sealer over the black background, so just that little bit that's showing over his eyes, nose, and lips and teeth and mouth. After that's cured, I'm going to be applying matte top coat over the rest of him, making sure I'm not going to be adding anything over those glossy areas, so kind of avoiding those, but making sure everything else gets a nice layer of matte top coat so the paint lasts a really long time. So I hope you guys like this design. This clown really freaks me out. I'm not usually afraid of clowns or anything, but I just kind of don't like them. So yeah. But like I said, I also did a face paint that was very similar to this guy. So if you like this and if you like freaky clowns, check that out. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!